Hello and welcome to another episode of Sustainability Asia. My name is David Milligan. I'm a banking partner in Norton Rose Fulbright's Hong Kong office. And in this series, we talk to colleagues and clients about sustainability issues. And today I'm really happy to be joined by Jono Adams. Jono is a director at Anthesis in London, and they're a consultancy who help companies on their sustainability journey. Jono, welcome. Before we get started, I think we need to know, what is net zero that people keep talking about?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to chat through things, David. So net zero is, first of all, we're all talking about climate change, so all about reducing greenhouse gases or carbon emissions, as they're generally termed. So net zero is a term that has evolved really since the Paris Agreement in the last but one COP, and it builds upon the Science-Based Target Initiative, and that is about helping corporates and organizations to make sure that they are reducing their emissions in line with what is required to try and minimize a climate impact globally to at least below 2 degrees, or hopefully a 1.5 and no more degrees increase in climate change. And really the net zero part of that is about making sure that those anthropogenic emissions are reduced to such a degree that then the final residual emissions are then balanced out. And that balancing out is about investing in removals, so certain types of carbon offsets. So in essence, the net effect is that you are have a zero emissions impact as an organization, as a corporate.
And so how do corporates start to align to net zero?
Well, so the first thing which is really important is actually understanding what their position is. So that's really knowing what their carbon impact is. Now this has been, usually termed a carbon footprint. Now this has been happening for a long time. Many Asian-based corporates and organizations will have sort of a good understanding of what is their direct emissions, so what's termed their scope 1 and their scope 2 emissions related to sort of electricity and gas usage. Not least, that's very much aligned with operational efficiencies, which is obviously critical within many type markets that many of your corporates and clients are working with. But then the really important and much more difficult part is those emissions which are termed sort of indirect emissions, which are within the supply chain, within the value chain, so upstream or in fact downstream. So how for Samsung, both how their suppliers are emissions look like in terms of the materials that they use to develop their products, but also in terms of usage by their customers, and not least in terms of end of life. So actually understanding that picture properly is not an easy task. So that's really the first part. And then the second part is to say, well, then making a commitment at a senior level to achieve net zero. So that is by actually setting a net zero target. So this, we are going to set a science-based target, which shows the trajectory of reduction, and then actually a longer-term net zero target, which might be out to 2040 or 2050.
I'm going to put you on the spot for your final question. Then, what would be your top 3 areas for a company to focus on?
So I think the first one is clearly getting your own sort of house in order. So when I spoke earlier about your sort of direct emissions, so and this is often very aligned to operational efficiencies, sort of cost improvement. So and that's probably, I'd like to just touch upon sort of 2 sub aspects of that. The first one is technology and management of capital assets, for example, or operational expenditure. So things like energy, electricity and gas usage. there's a a huge opportunity to decarbonize that beyond just what's happening within the infrastructure that a corporate or organization is already sitting in within a grid network. So, the idea of on-site renewables, or even engaging with renewable generators in fairly new arrangements and contractual arrangements, is something which is opening up more and more, including now within the Asian market. And then a second part of that is around the behavior change. So, engaging within your one of the drivers we didn't talk about was staff, with the community within your organization, getting them all bought in, both from the senior level all the way down the hierarchy, is absolutely critical, because there's no point setting a target if everyone isn't attuned to be able to progress to achieve those. Then looking outside of that, I've already mentioned supply chain, engaging with suppliers to say, look, our customer base, they may not be your customer base directly, but our collective customer base is calling for this. And that's not just within consumer sector. So how do we work with you as suppliers to affect change collectively? And there is a huge opportunity for that collective achievement, because you can do things at scale which you may not do individually. And so I think that is really key. And I think the third one is, as we move from the the transitional or the foundational to the transformational, is actually getting into the heart of your business objectives, of what you are as a business, and look at things like circular economical approaches. How can I actually identify new revenue streams? How can I identify new value by thinking about the way in which I am producing in a very different way? And there's wonderful examples of that across the board, not least in terms of how end of life waste is now being seen as a byproduct or revenue stream.
Jono, that's absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much for speaking to us. I think there's a lot there for corporates to be thinking about if they're serious about net zero. So that's all we have time for this week. We'll be back next week with another video.